So we get to the airport, your lovely airport, which I was completely lost and confused in, just so you know. But Sarah had all these people coming up to her saying, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" It's true.
I was actually kind of worried. I thought maybe there would be people that, big supporters of Ilhan Omar that would come up and say, "What are you doing here?"
We're going to get into that.
But I didn't get any of that. It was a wonderful welcome. Minnesota has such amazing people and just so kind.
Yeah, I agree. So friendly. And look, I tend to be a little disrespectful. So just, if you follow me on Twitter, which I only encourage you to do if you can handle it. But I did just send out a tweet with that great panel that Dan just had up here. And I said, so Muslim, a Jew, and a Christian walked into a CPAC, ... So.
I don't want to tell the rest of that joke. But I did meet a most amazing Minnesota resident. Her name was Lisa Prom. I won't forget it. We got off the plane, and she was no holds barred. She said, "I don't care what anyone thinks. Do you know who these two people are? They're from Fox News. And guess what? I'm a supporter of President Trump." And I was just like, wow, that's impressive.
Well, Sarah is like, it's one thing to be Sarah in that situation. It was another thing when she walked up to this tough guy from New York, and
that's right.
She said, "These people are for Trump, and they're from Fox News. What do you think?" And I was like, "I'm going to get decked. It's going to happen."
He just thought, this is it. I'm going down. The guy's like, "Well, I'm from New York City." And I'm like, all you have to say.
Okay, so it really is great to have you here, Sarah.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Sarah took the long 18 hours or whatever it was trip to a CPAC Japan with us as well, and with your family. It was
my family.
It was a great trip, and we really appreciate you doing that. And we appreciate, it's wonderful to be here, but it's also, I know, you're a busy person. We appreciate you being out here to talk about these serious issues, and I hope all of you out there appreciate the way in which we're approaching all of this. This is a reverential day for America, September 11th. This is special. And we're trying to approach it from several different standpoints. And Sarah, you write a constant stream of really great columns. People can follow you on
SarahCarter.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at SarahCarterDC.
Tell me, September 11th for you. Tell the folks here what it means to you.
It completely changed my life, and it changed my life every day over the last 18 years. It was the reason I became a journalist. Let me tell you a little bit about my childhood. My father worked for Lockheed Martin. He was a Marine. He served in World War II and in Korea. And I love our veterans. I love them. He took a job with Lockheed Martin when I was a little girl. I was 6 years old, and my dad moved the family to Saudi Arabia. And at that time, the kingdom was still building up. It was nothing like it is today. It was very different. I remember my dad trying to talk me into it by saying, "Don't worry, you're going to go to school on a camel, and you're going to get a genie." And I thought, well, there can be no other greater place in the world. Until I got there. And then it was just a lot of desert. I saw some camels. I didn't get to ride them to school. But I stayed there until I was 14 years old, and it had an indelible impact on my life and my family. My mother was amazing. She was a Cuban immigrant who came on the Johnson Freedom Flights in the late 1960s when Fidel seized Cuba. She was sponsored in the United States by a doctor in California, her family, and came here as a young woman in her 20s and worked very hard until she married my dad, and then she took a break for a while. I could tell you that living in the kingdom opened my eyes up to understanding other cultures and people. I was able to travel throughout most of the world with my father, and it really gave me an appreciation, a huge appreciation for how remarkable and great our nation is. And absolutely nothing like it on planet Earth. And I have traveled to pretty much almost every part of this planet. But come September 11th, after the attacks, I was sitting that morning, my mother woke me up, I got on the phone with her, she said, Sarah, did you watch the news? And I turned on the TV and I saw the second plane fly in. And I think I just sat there, probably like most Americans, with my eyes fixated on the television, watching this horrific scene unfold, people jumping from the towers, you know, so that they wouldn't be burned alive. The plane crashing into the Pentagon. I knew at that moment, after those sequence of events, and knowing the kingdom and understanding terrorism and what was happening in other parts of the world, I said immediately to my mother, even as the second plane went in, this is an attack, this is probably Al-Qaeda. And it changed my life forever. I went back to finish my education. I immediately decided to become a journalist. I started working at the Daily Bulletin in California, where I covered gangs. I had to start somewhere. I had crime and gangs, and ended up on the US-Mexico border. I told my editor, you know, the drugs are coming from somewhere, and these kids are telling me they're coming from Mexico, and they're killing each other on our streets, and our police officers are being targets. I want to go to the border. I want to find out what's happening. I went there, covered the border, covered the drug cartels, went into Mexico, spent a good portion of my career in and out of Mexico covering those stories. And then I got a call from the Washington Times that said, would you please come to Washington, D.C. and work for us? And I said, well, I'll only do that if you let me cover terrorism and our troops overseas. And I think they were kind of shocked by that. So they flew me to Washington, D.C. I made my pitch. I said, I want to cover the Pentagon and I want to go overseas. And he said, okay, you got the job, Sarah Carter. Let's see what you can do. I'll never forget that. That eventually, Matt, took me to immediately to Afghanistan and Pakistan, where Asra Nomani, I mean, what a phenomenal woman she is. I wanted to go to the Middle East, and I wanted to go to South Asia. I wanted to cover the story from the ground. And for me, that was the only way to deliver the truth to the American people about what was happening and what had happened to our nation, and why we were being targeted by groups like Al-Qaeda, like later on Islamic State, other groups, Al-Shabaab in Africa. It was so important for me, and was important for me too to tell the stories from the eyes of our soldiers who put their lives on the line every single day, and many of them lost their lives. I was, being out in the war zone and covering it as a woman is a different perspective. And I remember numerous events, but one in particular where I was out with the paratroopers, the PJs. They go in and they do fly-in rescues on the helos. They're Black Hawk helicopters. It's amazing. They're retrofitted to be like medical helicopters. So, we're flying in. I had trained before going on this mission. We're flying in. I'm sitting on the edge of the helicopter. I couldn't believe how amazing it was, flying over Kandahar, Afghanistan, thinking this is just the coolest thing in the world. What a lucky person I am to be able to see this, to be with our soldiers. And then we get a call. And it was that Humvee and a unit had rolled over an IED. And they had to go in and they had to fight their way to pull the men out. And I remember being shots fired at the helicopter, and there was another helicopter with us, and we flew in. And the men were wounded, and one of them, a young soldier, was dead. They put him in a small body bag, what was left of him, and put him on the helicopter with me. It wasn't so cool anymore. It was the last thing that poor soldier ever saw was that village in Afghanistan. And I sat there praying on the way back to take his body back to Bagram, thinking, he'll never get a chance to see his family again. September 11th changed our lives and changed the world forever. It affected all of us. We're still living with that every day, as Asra and Dr. Zuhdi Jasser talked about. Every day that a decision is made in the administration or at the White House, every time our troops go to battle, they're still over there right now, some of them losing their lives, some of them losing their limbs. So for me, September 11th was a culmination. It became my life. It still lives inside me. And I think it will live with me until the day I die. But the greatest thing, the most important thing I learned is how resilient, how amazing, and how strong we are as a nation, and that we will never give up, and we will never allow our nation to be targeted again. Never.
Thank you for that, Sarah. As we think back 18 years, why do you think it appears that we're forgetting aspects of that tragic day? And why are we electing people to Congress and other offices that euphemize the importance of fighting Islamic terrorism?
That is like the most important question. You know, we're constantly, and I wonder, and I always think about this, where did it all start? Where did we all feel that we needed to apologize for what happened to us? When did we become the bad guys in all of this? You know? I don't understand it. And the fear is, I know where you're going, Matt, because there are so many young people that don't remember September 11th right now. They weren't old enough to remember what it was like for us who saw it on the news, or who were in New York City, who had family that were there, or who lost loved ones that day, or felt that pain that lasted for weeks because the news just kept replaying and replaying and replaying over and